Hi, back again, and I wanted to make a video today about a topic that a lot of homeschooling parents struggle with, and that is how to teach math in our homeschool, specifically if we're unschooling, but really this goes for anyone that's homeschooling using any strategy. What I want to tell you today is that yes, there are ways that you can teach math and they're fun and they can get your child's interest, and you may even spark a passion in your child in math and a lifelong love of learning math. First of all, let's talk about what to avoid when we're approaching the topic of math in our homeschools or unschools. What we don't want is to have our math be the one class that's the bitter medicine that you have to take with a spoonful of sugar, and you're telling your kids, guys, we've got to do math because we've just got to do it. It's what kids do, and you better sit down and do your math just because. Okay, that reflects perhaps our own experiences in school with math. For example, I will tell you about my experience. I know that when I was in high school and I finally finished my last year of required math, I was done. And I told everyone I am not taking a single other math class my entire life. I swore it off. Well, I got to college and it came time to pick what degree I wanted to take. And I picked English teaching. And my reason that I would tell people why I picked English teaching is because I didn't have to take any math. And I was true to that statement. I never did take another math class. Okay, I'm laughing about this now, but it's really not that funny. It's kind of sad, isn't it? And I never did take math, but that's not necessarily such a great thing. I expect to take math with my kids and learn alongside of them in our homeschool. And I'm actually really excited for that because I think it'll be a lot more fun than the math classes that I was introduced to in school. Hopefully, I'll be able to reflect that fun and love of learning on my kids in their math experience. So let's talk about some ways to teach math so that we don't have math become such a burden on them that they swear it off for life, like I did. So math instruction really falls into what we can look at as a spectrum. And I'll talk about both ends of the spectrum in this video. On one side, we have totally child-led. It's completely what our kids want to do, when they want to do it, at their own pace. And in just a minute, I'll talk about the other side, which is where we teach based on a curriculum. And both ways absolutely can be done with a love of learning and a love of the subject matter. And then, of course, there are other ways that fit along and in between those two on the spectrum. So let's talk first off about the child-led method. And that is where we approach math and we learn math and we take math lessons and we teach our kids math only when they ask for it, pretty much, okay? And this can occur naturally, and it really does. And it comes down to trusting your kids and believing that they will have these interests and passions in their own due time. I wanted to share a story about a girl named Asher, which I came across her story online when I was learning about unschooling in the first place for myself. And her mom taught her math in this way, which was totally child-led. And Asher one day decided to learn algebra. Why did she just wake up and decide to learn algebra one day? Well, it occurred a little more naturally than that, in that she was very interested in chemistry for a while. And then learning about chemistry, which had mathematics in it, led to her wanting to understand why the math worked the way it did. So she asked her mom to help her learn algebra. And her mom does math professionally, so her mom was thrilled with this and of course guided her on that path to learning algebra. And I think that's so inspiring and gives me hope for my kids. If we will trust our kids and have faith in them and expose them to these different subjects, let them get a feel for what they're interested in, they will develop an interest in math in their own time. The next ideology I want to talk about in math instruction is that of using a curriculum. So like I said, that's on the other end of our spectrum, where it's more structured and we follow a pre-programmed design, and there might be worksheets involved. We might follow a specific pattern of what principles we learn, and they lead to the next principles. And this can be really effective for math because there are some great curricula out there that build really well upon what children have already studied and introducing them to new topics. So for example, my family has used Saxon Math in the past and we really love it. We're currently not into it, but I am thinking about doing so after doing this post. A story about a child who was successful using the curriculum method of learning math is Thomas. And I found his story, again, through researching online about moms and dads who have used the unschooling method for teaching their children math. And with Thomas, his mom didn't do a whole lot of math instruction at all. And then he got to the 6th grade and noticed that his peers were talking about the math they were doing at school. He asked his mom to please teach him math. And she did. She enrolled him in the Khan Academy, which is a really good example of a curriculum for math that teaches based going from principle to principle and has a really good order and organization. And she reports that after 4 hours of his course level in the Khan Academy, he had about 50% of the subject matter down, and he understood it really well. So that is awesome and a good inspiration and hope for those of us that want to use a curriculum for our math instruction. The next method to talk about in unschooling math is one that we're probably familiar with if we've looked into unschooling in math. It's what we may think of that many parents use for teaching math, and that is relating it to the real world. There are so many ways to relate math to real world activities that we already do every day. And maybe we just need to be a little more intentional about talking about the math with our kids and pointing it out so that they can apply the math principles that they're learning to their real lives. This helps with understanding, and it helps with loving the math because they can see that it's functional and it's not just something to be memorized and then forgotten. Some of the activities that we can use to introduce math include math games. There are so many math games, and I've got a blog post that lists several math games that are just fun and they're ways of introducing math principles into our lives every day. Also, we can do cooking with our kids. This is so much fun for kids. They love cooking, and there are numerous math principles we could study, such as measurements and temperature and degrees and fractions. So even multiplying fractions if we're going to be dividing a recipe. We could also use sewing as a way of teaching math every day. I'm personally not a seamstress, but I do know that you have to measure fabric and you have to plan for how many cuts you're going to do. You have to measure your cuts, and this is adding and subtracting and measuring. Also geometry, because sewing has to do with what shapes you're going to make your clothes out of. Budgeting, of course, is a great way to teach math with adding and subtracting and making sure your budget lines up and also that you're not spending more than you earn. Running a business is a great way to keep track of a budget and to account for what funds you've gotten from investors, making sure you can pay them back if your kids are gonna run a lemonade stand or maybe sell some of those clothes that you taught them how to sew. They can pay you back for anything that they've borrowed to be able to buy the materials, and calculate their income and what they've earned from that investment. Some other ways of relating math to the real world are music and keeping time. Speaking of time, keeping track of time, learning to read a clock and calculate minutes and hours and days and months and years. I don't know how many times I get asked by my kids when my birthday is going to be. Right, Alalie? We get asked that all the time, and rather than just telling the kids, maybe sit down with the calendar and show them how it works, how we figure out how many days they have left till their birthday or Christmas or vacation to Disney World or whatever it may be that they're excited about. Finally, we can do building projects with the kids. This is a fantastic way to let kids see how math works in real life, because we see houses get built every day, but maybe we don't realize how much math goes into measuring the materials that are going to be needed, measuring the cuts, calculating where to place things. And of course, this is one where the adult's going to take an active part in helping the kids. We don't want to set them loose with power tools, but involving the kids and letting them see that, again, might lead to a passion that you never knew your kids had. The next method I want to talk about with teaching math in our Unschool is using inspiration as a basis. I talk about this a lot in my posts because I believe really strongly that it is a very effective way to communicate a love of learning from ourselves to our children. And that is leading by example and learning math ourselves. Maybe even taking a course in a higher level math that we hadn't gotten a chance to learn. And I'm thinking maybe I need to sign up for an independent study course and repent of my mistake of never taking another math class and let my children see me learning and using math. And maybe we're in a profession where we naturally use math all the time. So let's show our kids and talk about that so they see why math is so useful and necessary in the real world. And again, Asher's and Thomas's stories are great examples of inspiration and why seeing someone learn math and enjoy it is so important and helpful in teaching our kids. The last way that I have found and have loved this idea of teaching math is teaching it as we teach a language. And not just teaching a foreign language, but here I mean learning a native language. And if you have kids, then you watched a toddler learn their native language. And you probably didn't sit them down and lecture them on what he or she or I or they or any other word means. But you used the language around your child all day long, and your child heard that and assimilated those words slowly over time. And as kids are exposed to these math principles consistently and over time, they will assimilate that just like they did with their native language. They'll put things together and figure out how it works and figure out how they can use it in their own lives. For example, I liked this example that I found that talks about multiplication and division, because a lot of us see multiplication and division as these rites of passage. I know I did, and I treated math that way with my older kids, where they arrived to a certain age and I said, okay, time to learn multiplication, time to learn division. And it's just because you should at this age. Where if we talk about math as a language, then kids will naturally figure out, oh, multiplication is just a faster way of adding, and division is a faster way of subtracting. So kids can figure this out, and they will through time, if we give them the resources and the space to do so in a fun, engaging, and loving manner. Thanks for watching today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'd love it for you to comment and share some ways that you've taught math in your homeschool, and if any of these ways have worked for you. Let me know if you have questions that you'd like to hear addressed in future posts too. I love those. And please like this video, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time. And division is a faster way of dividing, because I believe so strongly And look, the sun's gonna shine down on me as I'm talking about it. Is that a sign? I don't know. You hiding behind my chair. Don't do it again, okay? All right.